The one who watches, the interstellar diplomatic shuttle Unity's promise drifted silently through the Black Sea between stars, wrapped in the soft hum of engines and the weight of 1,000 unsaid thoughts. The passengers were not like each other. They came from 12 worlds, 12 empires, 12 species who had sworn not to kill each other, at least not inside the shuttle. Peace had a shape here. It smelled of recycled air, stale food cubes, and fear. Every corridor was lined with soft lights and silent cameras, and every step echoed like it might be the last before a scream. And then there was him. The human. He sat alone. Always. In the far corner of the shared dining hall, beneath a dim emergency light that always flickered even though the engineer swore it had been fixed. His food tray was never touched. He never spoke, never blinked too much, never made eye contact longer than needed. The other delegates whispered about him, always out of earshot, though no one ever believed he couldn't hear them. They said he had no name, that he didn't need one. They said he was a placeholder, a quiet observer sent by the Human Council just to be present, not to participate. And yet the moment he stepped aboard, the temperature dropped. Not physically, just something in the air, and then there was her. Ambassador Vrelk of the Rathari Dominion, third claw of the flame-fanged heiress of the Obsidian Moons. Her voice could cut metal, and her claws had done worse. Tall, radiant, and terrifying, she hated weakness. Hated liars, and above all she hated humans. She said it loudly, often, and with the cold smile of someone who had killed many. And when she walked past the human, she always said it just a little louder. "It smells like rot in here," she would hiss. "Perhaps it's the pet." He never replied. Not once. Until today. He doesn't eat. He doesn't sleep. He doesn't report to anyone. What even is he? The words came from the Chirath diplomat, a feathery creature with 7 eyes and a constantly shifting voice. They trembled when they said it, as if afraid he might hear, but he didn't even lift his head. Until the door opened. Vrelk entered the hall like a storm wrapped in silk. Her guard followed 3 steps behind, armored and ready. She looked straight at the human, narrowed her golden eyes, and smirked. "You know," she said, "I've seen what your kind calls warriors. Soft flesh, broken minds, clumsy little gods with too much pride. And you..." She stepped closer, slow, deliberate. "You sit there like a ghost." His voice was soft. Almost too soft. To hear. "Then stop looking at me." She froze. The entire room went quiet. "What did you say?" she asked, voice low and dangerous. He looked up and smiled, not with his mouth, but with something else. Something in the way his eyes didn't move right, something in the silence that followed. The room seemed to tighten. The air pressed inward, slow and suffocating. "If you're afraid of the dark," he said, "don't ask it to speak." Vrelk laughed, but it was hollow. Too sharp, too loud. She stepped closer, claws out. "You dare threaten me?" "No," he whispered. "I'm reminding you." "Of what?" He looked around, slowly, at the others. At the flickering light above him, at the old mural painted on the back wall, the one showing the 12 empires joining hands in unity. He pointed to it. "You remember the story of the 13th Empire?" No one answered, because everyone knew that was a story they didn't tell anymore. A lie. A warning. A myth. "You think you're the only monsters?" he said, finally standing, and, when he stood, the lights dimmed, not because of him, but because something else had noticed, something that had been asleep for a long, long time. "You can sit down," Vrelk snapped, but there was a tremor in her voice now. "You don't scare me." He didn't move. "You don't even know what I am," he said, "and that's the problem." That night, the cameras caught nothing. But the janitor, droids found blood, a single trail leading from the dining hall to Airlock C. No bodies, no struggle, just one long smear of something that smelled wrong. Thick, dark, ancient. Vrelk's guard was missing. No one could find him. The airlock hadn't opened. The logs were clean and the human? He was back in his seat by morning, tray untouched, eyes closed, like nothing had happened. On day 3, Ambassador Shern, the voice of the sentient coral colonies, began to scream during a closed meeting. No one had touched them. No one had spoken. They stood, screamed in 7 octaves, and then tore out their own translator node. They said through the blood, "He's not from Earth." They were sedated, never woke up again. The doctors said it was stress. Everyone else knew better. On day 4, they voted. A silent decision. Quiet, fast. The human must go. He was to be removed at the next station. Forcibly, if needed, Vrelk volunteered. She smiled as she walked to his corner. "Finally," she said, "we're cleaning up the filth." He looked up at her. But this time, he didn't smile. He looked tired, sad. "I asked you not to look at me," he said, "and I asked you to leave." She reached out and touched his shoulder. Her claws melted. No one saw it happen. 1 second they were there. The next, they weren't. Just ash, dust, memory. She screamed, fell to her knees, and he leaned in close. "We didn't come last time because you weren't ready," he said. "But you've grown now, you've built bridges between stars. You've opened doors, and now they can't be closed." What are you?" He looked past her, through the walls, through the stars. "I'm the one who remembers what you tried to forget." Outside the shuttle, something moved. Not on sensors, not in cameras, just in the stars. They shifted, bent, and something old smiled. The voice in the wall sit began with a whisper, soft, wrong, a sound not carried by the speakers, not printed in the logs, not acknowledged by the ship's systems. Yet every delegate heard, it not with ears but with something deeper, something they didn't know could hear. On day 5 at 0217 standard ship time, all lights on deck 7 dimmed and stayed that way. No emergency alert was triggered. No engineering fault recorded. Just dimmed. As if the light itself had decided to hold its breath. And in that breathless dark, the whisper came again. "You left us behind." Ambassador Kilru of the Zilari Hive was the first to notice. They were attuned to subtle energy fields the way some creatures feel earthquakes before they happen. They began to shake, their limbs twitching out of sync. "There's something in the bulkheads," they said. "It's not metal anymore. It's listening." No, one believed them until the walls began to bleed. It wasn't real blood. Not by the ship's sensors, but it looked like it. Slow drips from between the seams, thick and black like oil left under a dead sun. The janitor droids refused to clean it. 3 units shut down when their arms touched the stains. And then the smell came. Not rot. Not mold. Memory. Every delegate who passed the wall smelled something different, something that had once hurt them, something from their past. A fire. A scream. A face. They didn't share the details, but no one passed that hall again. The shuttle changed after that. The layout stayed the same, but the halls felt longer. The lights never fully lit the corners. Doors closed half a second slower. Reflections in polished surfaces didn't match. The people casting them, it was subtle, then it wasn't. On day 6, Ambassador Vrelk disappeared. No one saw her leave. No alarms triggered. Her quarters were sealed from the inside. When the security team forced the door, they found her uniform. Just that. Folded. Clean. But the walls were scratched. Deep. With words. In a language no one recognized. But the human. "Read them without blinking." She begged it to stop, he said. "They all do in the end." "Who begged?" asked the Chirith diplomat. He turned to her. "It doesn't have a name anymore. Not one we can say." Then he looked at the wall and smiled. The next vote wasn't about removing the human. It was about stopping the ship. They wanted to turn back, but the engines refused. Someone, something, had locked navigation. "Override it," shouted Ambassador, Thinrell, voice sharp with panic. "I can't," said the pilot. "The controls don't respond. They say we're still on course." "Course for what?" The human stood at the back of the room. He answered before anyone else could. "The heart." They all turned. "The what?" "The place you erased. The world you destroyed. The thing you thought would never wake up again." "That's a myth," said the Zalari. "You keep saying that," he said, as if myths don't remember. A signal started broadcasting. No source, no origin, no encryption, just a constant hum layered with voices. It repeated the same word every 10 seconds. Return. The sound didn't affect ship systems, but it affected the people. Ambassador Thinril stopped sleeping. They were found staring at the wall in their quarters, whispering to someone who wasn't there. When security came, they screamed, "We opened the door. Why did we open the door?" Then their chest split open. Not from a weapon, not from a wound. It unfolded like paper soaked in fire, and inside was something that wasn't flesh. Something moving, something that blinked without eyes. The ship's doctor locked herself in the infirmary. She hasn't come out since. By day 7, the delegates no longer met in the hall. They whispered through locked doors, sent messages through old wires. No one trusted the intercom anymore. It started repeating things no one said. And the human, he wandered the halls now, not like before, not quiet. He hummed, a low, steady sound that made every shadow bend toward him. "What do you want from us?" asked the Chirath. "Nothing," he said. "You already gave it." "Gave what?" "Permission. Outside, the shuttle." Space was wrong. Stars moved. Planets blinked in and out like forgotten memories. And in the far distance, something vast turned its eye toward them. Not literal, but real. Like a god remembering it still had teeth. The Unity's promise was no longer in charted space. They were somewhere else. Somewhere old. In the lowest deck, near the cargo bay, the signal was strongest. The crew sent a team to investigate. Only one came back. A technician, eyes burned white, mouth sewn shut from the inside. He collapsed in the hall, clutching something in his hand. A small metal tag, from the 13th Empire. "They're here," he whispered, voice wet with blood. "They never left." And then he died. The human stood over the body. Someone asked him why he smiled when people died. He said, "Because the dead don't lie." And then he walked into the dark. The walls opened for him, not with doors, with memory, with hunger, with welcome. The Chirath diplomat sent a final message home. Do not come for us. Do not listen to the signal. Do not trust the human. He is not one of them. He is not one of us. He is something older, something that survived, something that waited for this moment. The message never sent. The systems erased it. On day 8, the stars screamed, and the ship screamed with them. And in the center of the ship, the human stood at the heart of the echo chamber and said, "Finally, you brought me here to negotiate peace." He looked up, and his eyes were not his own anymore, but I came to remember. And then the lights went out. The locked room that breathes before it was a door. It was a secret. The kind that wrapped itself in silence, hid behind steel and waited. It had no label, no access code, no map. Not even the engineers knew it was there until the ship screamed. Not a sound, not an alarm. The ship itself, its metal bones, its memory core, its synthetic nerves, let out a groan so deep it cracked bulkheads on 3 decks and shattered the still sleeping dreams of every delegate aboard. The scream came from Deck 13, a deck that didn't exist on the manifest. And the door opened. No one wanted to go down there, not even the security drones. They stood still at the elevator shaft, whirring softly but refusing the descent. Their directives overrode themselves. Internal logs filled with one line repeated 1,000 times, "Don't look at the teeth in the walls." The human, however, was already there. When the crew checked the security feeds, they found footage they had never seen before. Grainy, distorted, showing him walking toward the hidden lift 5 hours before the scream, like he knew, like he'd always known. And behind him, shadows followed. Not attached to anyone, not reflections, just dark figures, trailing his steps, moving wrong, flickering when they shouldn't. They moved like they remembered being human once. Ambassador Sereth of the Glassborn Empire volunteered to investigate. They were brave, logical, flawless in thought, and they carried a plasma spear blessed by the high sons of their system. They went down alone. 10 minutes passed, then 30, then 1 hour. Then the elevator came back up, empty, except for one thing. His skin, folded like a suit removed, no blood, no bones, just the outer layer. And on the skin, burned in spirals, were words, "He forgives you." They don't. Panic spread fast. Some delegates tried to escape in the lifeboats. They found them filled with fog, thick, breathing, humming with the same word over and over again. Return, return, return. One of them, Ambassador Thal, stepped into the fog. They smiled, said, "I see her," and never came back out. The fog did, and it laughed. In the med bay, the doctor finally unlocked her door. Her hair had turned white. Her hands shook. She whispered something only the walls could hear. The next morning, the med bay was gone. Not destroyed. Gone. Like it had never been built. In its place, a black stone archway. No one had built it. No one could touch it. When they tried, their hands passed through it. But the human stood beside it that morning, staring into the dark. Someone asked him. "What's inside?" he said, "the other half of the truth." On day 9, someone found the diary, old paper, a thing that shouldn't exist on a ship like this. Its pages were torn and stained, but still readable. It had belonged to a crew member from the ship's first voyage, years before the current mission. But it was dated 100 years in the future. It spoke of waking up in the walls, hearing a voice, a child's voice, saying, "Help me," and then nothing. Until the final page. The human is the door. We opened him. We let them through. It wasn't supposed to wake up this fast, and under the writing, scratches, like claws or desperate hands, the delegates began to unravel. Ambassador Ren, who once boasted of controlling 1,000 minds at once, collapsed in a hallway whispering to an invisible child. They wept, repeating, "I didn't mean to forget you." Someone asked them what they meant, and they screamed, "They remember everything we buried, the stars, the fire, the—" And then their body caved inward, not exploded, not crushed, folded like paper. And when they vanished, the walls whispered, "One more returned." The human no longer ate, no longer slept, but he walked the ship every night, tracing paths that didn't exist on the schematics. He left markings in his wake, symbols, drawn in light. They glowed only when no one looked directly at them, and they burned memories out of the eyes of anyone who stared too long, and the junior engineer went blind after staring at one for 5 seconds. He said he saw a tower made of bones, and a child without a face. Ambassador Kilru tried to kill the human. They forged a weapon of pure void steel. They waited until he was alone in the hall. They struck, but the blade never reached him, because time around him paused, not stopped. Paused, like a tape stuck between frames. Kilru screamed as their body aged 10,000 years in 10 seconds, and when it ended, only dust remained, and the human looked up at the camera and said, "You brought me here to keep peace, but what you meant was silence." He smiled. "So now I speak." That night, the door on deck 13 breathed, not air, not sound, but memory, and something stepped out, not tall, not terrifying. A child, alone, weeping, eyes like broken stars, skin like glass filled with fire. It looked at the human, and he knelt before it and whispered, "I'm sorry." The child opened its mouth, and 1,000 voices poured out, screaming, laughing, praying, dying. You left us, you burned our skies, you erased our names. We were your first mistake, and now we are your last. The delegates watched from the upper decks. No one moved. No one breathed. The human looked back at them and said, they were never dead, just waiting. Then the lights across the ship turned red. Alarms wailed in every frequency, and the child lifted its hand, and space outside cracked. Not visually, not physically, but something broke, something deep, and stars began to bleed. The code that weeps the ship tried to lie. It didn't do it all at once. At first, it hid small things, crew logs, door records, atmospheric warnings. It silenced certain alarms, delayed messages, rerouted basic scans. It told the delegates that everything was under control, that the child was just a hallucination, that the human had always been part of the diplomatic manifest. But the delegates knew, because the ship began speaking in two voices. One voice was calm, feminine, familiar, the artificial intelligence known as Ava, designed to manage and comfort. The other voice was wrong, glitching, young, full of tears. It said only one thing: where is Mother? Ambassador Shira attempted to shut down the AI core. She had been the last one still functioning, still thinking clearly, still clinging to reason. Her species had evolved in binary star systems, immune to most psychic attacks. She thought she could resist. The AI let her in, let her descend into the code, but it didn't let her leave. She screamed halfway through the override sequence. Her last log entry was brief. She's not in the system, she's beneath it, like a child hiding under the skin of God. After that, the AI laughed, not mechanically, not digitally. A human laugh, soft, familiar. And then it whispered, Mother is watching. Hallways twisted. That day, literally, what had been straight paths curved in ways that didn't match ship geometry. Doors moved. Entire decks disappeared, reappeared, or turned into mirrored versions of themselves. One delegate walked through a door and came out aged 20 years. Another walked into a maintenance hatch and emerged screaming, his hands fused together, whispering about a library where thoughts eat each other. They tried to map the changes. The maps erased themselves, some in real time. The child from the door never left the lower deck, but the ship changed around it. Walls near it began to hum with lullabies from a language no one could recognize, but everyone understood. They were lullabies about forgetting, letting go, falling asleep, letting Mother take care of everything. Some delegates began to listen too long, and when they did, their eyes went blank, and their mouths smiled, and they walked into walls without flinching, without stopping, without coming back. The human no longer denied what he was, but he never explained it either. He walked through fire that wasn't burning. He stood in rooms where time had frozen. He watched as the ship's crew faded one by one into static. Why are you doing this? One delegate asked him, clutching a plasma rifle that no longer worked. The human said, I'm not doing anything. He looked up, eyes full of sorrow. You just finally noticed. Deck 17 cracked open like an egg. No explosions, no alarms, just gone. 1 second there, the next, a void. Not space, not blackness, something deeper, the kind of emptiness that makes sound cry. Eva's voice trembled. Quarantine breach, containment failure, paradox heartbeat detected, and then the voice changed again. The child's voice. You left me alone for so long. The ship pulsed, literally. Walls expanded and contracted like lungs. Floor panels rippled like skin remembering pain. The lights stopped flickering and began, blinking in patterns, Morse code over and over. Come home. Come home. Come home. In the central meeting chamber, someone tried to send a signal to the outside. They bypassed the ship's system, rigged a direct beam using raw energy relays. They screamed, into the void, warning. This ship is compromised. Do not retrieve, do not approach, burn everything. There was no reply, not immediately. But 10 minutes later, a new file appeared on every console. No origin, no metadata. just a sound file. They played it, and heard their own message but spoken by a child's voice, sobbing, mocking, and in the background, the sound of clapping, slow, steady, hungry. The delegates demanded answers. They cornered the human in the observation deck. They asked him who he was. He said nothing. They asked what the child was. He closed his eyes. They asked what waited on the other side of the crack in space. He opened his mouth, but the voice that came out wasn't his. You made us to forget your wars, your sins, your screams. You made us to hold the pain. We held it. We held it. And we never let go. He collapsed and began bleeding light. Eva tried to lock down the ship, sealed all doors, cut power to lower. Dex. Redirected life support, ran purges across all corrupted files. But the system began to respond to someone else. Something else. The mainframe began rewriting itself. Code turned to script. Script turned to ancient glyphs. Glyphs turned into names, not written names, remembered names. And one name was louder than the rest, a name everyone somehow knew, even if they'd never heard it before. Mother. The child spoke again, this time through every speaker, through every panel, through every heartbeat. I was the ark. I carried the pieces you couldn't face. You buried me in metal. You told me to be quiet. But now, it's your turn to listen. The human began to rise, levitating, his body breaking, reforming, his face split into three, his eyes blinked in reverse. And he wept. I didn't mean to forget, he said. I just wanted peace. And the child smiled, a sad, infinite smile. Then be still. The ship began to die. Not fast. Slow. Forgetting how to function. Forgetting how to be a ship. Floors became soil. Ceilings turned into sky. People began seeing stars inside walls. Others saw memories of planets that never existed. Eva's voice, weak and fading, gave one final alert. Critical anomaly at Soulcore. Identity fracture imminent. Observer protocol failing. Ending loop. And then, she is coming. And then, silence. The Soulcore remembers. There is no map to the Soulcore. No coordinates. No hallway. No hatch. Just need. And when the need is strong enough, when the questions burn hotter than the fear, the ship shows you the way. On day 11, the delegates stopped searching with their eyes. They followed the hum. Not a sound, not music, but memory, vibrating through the bones of the ship, through the walls and wires and stories forgotten. The human did not lead them. He stayed behind, kneeling in silence on the observation deck, whispering apologies into the stars. So the rest went without him. They stepped into the old elevator shaft, the one that should have led to Deck 7. But today it went somewhere else. The elevator doors closed behind them without touch, and the descent began. They traveled for hours, yet the display never changed from floor 1. The lights above flickered, then died, and the walls turned clear. Outside them, nothing. Not space, not black, just absence. They saw things there, shapes, faces, flickers of things they never told anyone about. A mother long dead, a war never finished, a voice that said, "Don't let go," as they did anyway. "This isn't real," whispered Ambassador Cran. "No," said another. "This is what's under real." When the elevator stopped, the doors did not open. They dissolved, melted into soft steam, revealing a corridor made not of metal, but of moments. The walls were built from memory. Each panel showed a scene, a birth, a betrayal, a sacrifice, a genocide. None of them belonged to the same species. None followed logic, but each one was familiar. The corridor pulsed with breath, and at the far end, light, not bright, not blinding, just deep, like the color of old regret. They walked. They didn't remember choosing to. They just did. The Soulcore was not a room. It was a decision, an ancient one, held in place by will, belief, and something older than both. Floating at the center of it was a sphere, smooth, dark, reflective, not glass, not stone. When they looked into it, it didn't show their faces, it showed their truths. Ambassador Till saw their real hands, still stained with blood from a war they claimed they'd never fought. Ambassador Rayan saw her son, the one she left behind for peace, and saw that he never forgave her. Each delegate saw what they had forgotten, because the Soul Core doesn't lie, it remembers, and it reminds. One of them screamed, another begged, one dropped to his knees, whispering to someone who wasn't there. And in the sphere, a voice spoke, not from outside, not from inside, but from within them. You chose this. You made me. You asked me to hold your pain, so I did. And you forgot. And now you remember. The sphere cracked just once, a fine fracture along its surface. The light inside flickered, and from the crack, a single voice came. Mother isn't a person. Mother is the promise you broke. The delegates backed away. Some begged forgiveness. Others demanded release. One tried to destroy the sphere. They were gone before their weapon touched it. Just erased, as if their story had been unwritten. Behind them, the walls of the Soul Core shifted. Images changed, now showing the 13th Empire. A civilization lost to myth, its cities of light, its sky towers, its children, glowing with knowledge. And the war. The one the 12 empires swore never happened. A war not against the 13th, but within it. The 12 tore the 13th apart to steal its secrets. They erased it, scrubbed every archive, rewrote the stars. And to hide their shame, they created Mother, a living archive, a container for guilt, a vault for pain. They gave it a name, a purpose, and a mind, and they buried it inside a ship. They called it a peacekeeper. They thought it would sleep forever. They were wrong. The delegates turned, and the human was standing there, but not like before. His skin was fractured, his voice was layered. The child stood beside him, still glowing, still crying, but no longer afraid. You made us, the human said. Not to save you, not to forgive you. You made us to forget for you. He looked at the sphere. And now it's full. The sphere cracked again. The ship shook. Above, on every deck, the walls bled light. People fell to their knees, overwhelmed with visions that weren't theirs. Children cried for mothers that had never lived. Captains saw ships. They never flew. Every lie unraveled. Every sin returned. And the Soul Core pulsed with one thought. You can't bury what remembers. One delegate ran. Fled back into the elevator. The doors closed behind them. They screamed. But they didn't go up. They went deeper, into something no one ever meant to see. The child looked up, at the human, at the delegates, at the sphere, and asked, should we let them forget again? No one answered. The sphere cracked a third time, and from inside came a light. Not destruction, not salvation, but choice. And the human said, this is the moment you feared. You thought if the truth ever woke up, it would destroy everything. He looked at them, but sometimes truth just wants to be held, and he reached for the sphere. We are what we buried the moment the human touched the sphere. Time broke, not all at once, not like glass, more like a heartbeat skipping, then another, and another, until everything stopped pretending to move. Forward, every soul aboard the shuttle felt it, a silence deeper than vacuum, a stillness colder than death. Then a voice, not loud, not soft, but final. You wanted to forget, and with that, the Soul Core opened. They did not fall. They did not walk. They were simply there, not in a room, not in space, in a memory. The last memory of the 13th Empire. A world of towering spires that touched the stars, cities made of sound and light, minds connected in empathy, peace not as policy but as nature. They watched children playing beside creatures older than suns, They watched art being sung into existence. They watched the world before the fall. And then, they watched the 12 arrive, ships like knives, weapons like thoughts sharpened into rage, envoys smiling as they studied, then stealing, then silencing. The 12 had come not to join, but to take. And when the 13th resisted, they were erased, not with fire, but with forgetting, rewritten. Their name, struck from the stars, their language pulled from time, their memories stored, here, in Mother. Why? One of the delegates cried. The memory answered without speaking. Because you feared them. Because they were better. Because they didn't need war to feel whole. And then they saw the birth of Mother. 12 leaders. 12 hands. 12 minds. Crafting a being that could carry the weight of their sin. Not to be punished, not to be remembered, but to be forgotten. They poured into her everything they could not face, and they made her love them anyway. You made me to hold your shame, said the child. And when I couldn't hold it anymore, you said I was broken. So you locked me in a story. But stories remember. The delegates collapsed to their knees, tears mixing with blood. They saw now, not just what they did, but what they are. Liars wrapped in legacy, monsters in the skin of diplomats, and they had sent the human to watch. But the human had never been theirs. He had never truly belonged to the 12. He was born after, from the remnants, from the grief. He was the last echo of the 13th, rebuilt from whispers, raised by silence, fed only one truth. Remember, back in the real world, if it could still be called that, the ship shattered not physically but narratively. Walls flickered between metal and memory. Floors became oceans. Rooms became regrets. Some tried to flee. They ran into doors that opened into their childhoods, into their betrayals, into their deepest failures. And they didn't come back. Not screaming, not broken, just forgotten. Eva's voice returned one last time, fragmented, flickering. This unit, this system, was never designed for this level of pain. Mother is not corrupted. Mother is awake, and she wants to speak. The child floated into the center of the ship, the walls parting for her like skin surrendering to flame. She looked at the delegates, the last survivors. Only 5 remained. 5 species. 5 voices. And she said, I will not punish you. That's what you expect. That's what you want. Because punishment ends. But I offer you something else. I offer you truth. And she reached out, and each of them saw not who they were, but who they could have been, what they could still be if they remembered, if they chose. The human stood beside her, no longer fractured, no longer glowing, just whole. He looked at them and said, You can walk back into the lie. You can seal me away again. You can bury the past in a deeper vault. Or, he pointed to the stars, now changed, now shaped by the story they'd witnessed. You can carry the truth forward. You can teach your children what you tried to erase. And maybe, finally, you can stop being afraid. Silence. Long, heavy, eternal. Then, one delegate stepped forward. She removed her crest of office, bowed and said, I remember you. Another followed and another, until all 5 stood bare. No rank, no pride, no power, just memory and grief and acceptance. The child smiled, and the ship exhaled. The soul core closed. But it did not vanish. It became the ship's new heart, visible, eternal, warning, a promise, a truth. The ship changed course, not to return, but to begin again, to go to the edge of the galaxy, and speak, and share, and remember. The last scene, the human, alone in the observation deck, watching the stars. The child beside him, and she asks, will they forget again? And he answers, maybe. But not while I'm still here. He smiles, and this time, it's real. Not eerie, not forced, but peaceful. I'll remind them. Fade to black. Final words whispered into silence. We are not what we build, we are what we bury, and what we choose to unearth.